So this is the tools that are required to change the camber arms. We have a 1/2 inch breaker bar, a 1/2 inch socket that is 32mm 12 point for the AMG, 16mm socket, 10mm socket, 3/8 drive ratchet, 32mm spanner, a 16, there's a 22 thrown in there for the new bolts on the camber arm, 16mm ratchet, 30mm ratchet, spanners, 30mm spanners, and then a 10, 8, and I've got a 10mm ratchet spanner. And then last but not least, a T45 Torx bit and some Loctite. So I almost forgot the E12, which is a T55, and then an E14 Torx socket. This is actually just below T60, so it must be like a T58 or something like that. But those two sockets are needed to remove a support bar, which is on the inner arch under the black plastic cover. Once you've got the wheel removed, you'll see on the AMG that you've got a 12-point 32mm socket, but the top arm is the one we're removing, so we can make it adjustable, so we can bring out the camber. There's a height level sensor and 2 bolts at the rear for the rear bushes. But that is basically it. So we'll loosen off this 45mm Torx bit that goes inside, 32mm 12 pointed socket or spanner, whichever you want to put on there. These two are 16s and there is nuts on the outside. So that is the front nut, and the other one is under this cover, which will lift up. With the driver's side, you have a single twist clip which just turns to unlock, and you'll most likely need to remove the window wiper this side so you can actually get the clearance to lift this up enough so we can get down to the bolt. So there's not much to watch out for. This hangs no problem at all. The brake line's not under any stress, and the 2 sensors, which will probably break an ABS, they just unclip, so no worries there. So with this removed, you can remove the nylon washer that holds the top taper bush captive. You can wind that off, take that top bush off, because you'll be reusing all of this stuff. I prefer to just unclip the electrics and then obviously unbolt this whole lot and take it off the arm as one. So the sensor, the link, and everything that goes with it comes off, and then you can deal with that once it's off the car. So at this point you can take note of where the arm is, so you can reposition the aftermarket arm in exactly the same place. Obviously if you've lowered the car, these should actually have been undone and then repositioned, and in this case, when the springs were fitted, I doubt these bolts were actually undone, so the arm could then be repositioned. They'll probably just stress slightly. So in this case, we're actually going to leave these bolts loose after the arm's fitted. We're going to lower the car on the wheels, and we're going to mark where the arm sits in its standard position and then re-bolt them up so there's no preload on the bushes from the new arms. Once you've removed the 16mm from the wiper, it's sometimes better either to mark the windscreen with a bit of paint or mark in here with a paint. I'll be using a paint pen. These are really handy for marking everything. They're the Edding 750. So we'll just put 2 little dots so we can realign the wiper in exactly the same place. It looks a little low anyway, but I'm sure that's fine. So there's my 2 paint marks to make sure that this goes back in exactly the same place. The wipers normally need a good wiggle. Obviously be careful that you're not going to break it, but normally they need a little wiggle side to side, up and down, just to release the tapered fit. So with that wiper removed, we can then move over to the other wiper. Again, it's just 2 16s. I've taken the black caps off already. Again, 16s off, mark them, and then you can remove that wiper so we can get this top panel off. Okay, so on the passenger side, to get to the top rear bolt of the arm, you need to take off that rubber, unlock the 2 clips there and there, and then that can lift up. Normally it stays there, no problem. The bolt is basically just down there, which I'll show you in a second, but you're just gonna pull in the sides of the pollen filter and you can remove that out of the way. With the passenger side wiper removed, there's a single little black clip here to allow you to bring this whole thing up. So with the outer clip removed over here, we can then lift the entire piece and it will hold itself on the rod damper or shock for the bonnet. So in the actual inner arch, you'll see that there is a T55 and then two T55s right up the end, which need to be removed so you basically can get inside of the inner arch area to get that back nut off. So with the rear E12 or T55 Torx bolts removed, you can move on to the E13 or must be like E58 or something Torx bolt, and then this whole arm can come out of the way. And then go ahead and remove the silver alley support bar on the C63. Once both of them out of the way, you should be able to get your hand down, get to that back nut, no problem at all. So with both those braces removed, you can easily get your hand down inside to get to that rear nut for that top wishbone. Two nuts removed, you can go ahead and remove the two bolts. As you can see, I've partially removed that left hand top one, but I'll pull those through from the inside, and then we can bring down the arm and unclip the electrics for the height sensor. The passenger side, which is the hardest side to do, has another bolt for the front bush, which is behind the aircon pipes, but again you can get to it with a spanner from the top. With the top cover removed, we can go inside and hopefully you can see that bolt there. That is the inside top nut that you need to basically secure while you undo the one inside. So both of these are 16s, and you can see I'm going to turn this inside one, and the outside one, which was in that cubby hole, will be held stationary with another 16mm spanner. Then on the inside, it's just a case of getting on there with another 16 and undoing it. We've also got to remove the level sensor, which is for the lights, and then we can remove that top arm as one. So here are the top arms from Camber King for the Mercedes C63. They're sided, as you can see, offset ball joint, which obviously needs to be adjusted, and then they've got the height level sensors with two new adjustable links. As with the other side, it's easier to remove the whole sensor as one unit and then attempt to get this nut off. You can hold the inner one with a pair of pliers or a spanner if you've actually got a small enough one, and then crack off the 10mm on the end. So there's the original arm next to the Camber King arm, and I've removed the sensor. This was slightly harder than normal due to corrosion causing a problem, but you can now lay this arm on top of the other arm, get yourself roughly in the right position. You'll most likely be trying to reduce camber, so you can always elongate this ball joint slightly or elongate the total arm length slightly. You're going to have the alignment done regardless anyway, so they will obviously unfortunately have to unbolt this, wind it out a few, bolt it back up, put it back on the machine, so on and so forth, rinse and repeat. So we'll get that fitted up on the passenger side now. The other thing to take note of is the fact that the new arms for the height level sensor are shorter because they're assuming you are lowering the car, but they're quite a bit shorter. So this side has had thread lock placed on it, and then the other side is adjustable. So the maximum length for this actual arm is that much shorter than the original. These units have a clip which runs round, which you pop off and then slide out so you can get the ball in. You'll have to remove the ball out of the unit that went through the sensor. You just place the spanner between the rubber bush here and the 8mm half cut nut, and then you just pry and she'll pop right out. And then you can affix it to the height level sensor, and the ball is the correct size to go into the new adjustable link. And you can see here I've pulled the clip through, and then that will just slide out. Then you can fade the ball back in, slot that clip back in and clip it. The ball will literally pop in, you can put some grease in there and then it does just push home, and then you can get that clip in, no problem. You can use pretty much any grease, no copper greases or greases that hold materials in them, but a lithium based grease, or I use this high quality shell grease. A very small dab, as I'll show you. End of that screwdriver is plenty enough grease. You don't want to push too much in that it's pushing out once you push the ball in, as that'll attract grit and dirt, and obviously then dirt will get in there and ruin the ball joint. So that's the amount of grease on the edge there. You can try and push that down, or you just push the ball in. As long as you clean it up afterwards, should be all good. So I push the ball straight in, and as you can see, it's just a small little area, and I'll wipe that off, and then I'll put the clip through. So I've aligned the arms above each other, and I'm just going to basically pull this ball joint out slightly to reduce the camber that we're currently running. And with the nut nipped up, it's about 14 millimeters worth of thread. So we're now going to refit using all the standard bolts, reattach the height level sensor and adjust roughly. Because these bushes are pressed in rubber and they're not spherical joints in any way, well, that's how they've come with this kit, you'll want to make sure that this arm is actually in a position and bolted up tightly where the car is going to sit when it's down on its wheels. So with the arm back in place with the original bolts, you'll then want to, before you tighten it up fully, find the position where the car actually holds that arm when it's down on its wheels, and then bolt them up there so you don't put any preload or bind into those rubber bushes. If you haven't already looked and measured where they are roughly, give or take, you can always leave those outer bolts loose and then rebuild the whole thing, and then obviously tighten them up afterwards once you've rechecked. And that tapered collar sits inside there, and then the ball joint taper can go through inside, and you can reuse the nylon clip if you wish. Then you can retighten the original 12-point nut that goes on and pull the rest of it together. So when putting back in the height level sensor for the lights, you need to align that top V with a piece of metal on the shell, and then you can slide the bolt through. So you can see I've installed the light level sensor, the clip's back on, everything's done up, this is done up. I haven't yet done these up finally because the arm's still hanging down. This has still got to be done up, but the height level sensor is on and it's loose, so we can still pop it off and adjust it as necessary to level out the lights. So I'll finish doing up these, I'll nip up the two inner arm bolts, and then we'll get the car to sit roughly where we want it, and then we'll check the angle and retighten the top bolts so it's in position. When reinstalling this lower nut, I like to use a little bit of Loctite to make sure that thing isn't going to come loose. I believe there was original Loctite in there, so the medium thread locker, perfect for the job. So with no torque section, as in the original, you'll have to basically hold the top nut and then tighten up the bottom nut. I haven't put the Loctite in just yet, as we're going to be removing this and putting it back on to adjust the actual camber settings on the adjustable part of the arm. And we've now got both of the rear bolts just slightly nipped. You can easily turn the arms without any distortion in the bush. So then we'll get it drop down on the wheel and we'll just paint mark where the top arm is, so then we can actually jack this whole unit up and then tighten them in the correct place. With the arm back in and the bolts just gently nipped, I'll go through the rest of the processes on the other side. So wheel back on and everything's loosely done up in there, and I'm going to lower the car down and check where that top wishbone needs to sit for the permanent bolt up. So I put the wheels back on, dropped the car down to sit on its, standard ride height, or the ride height that it's now set out with these springs. And I basically measured from inside the arch, from the bottom of the welded boss on the back to the top of the arch, and that measured 70 millimeters in its standard ride height, or this ride height position. So now what we'll do is we'll jack the whole assembly up off of the ball joint underneath, until we get to that 70mm area, and then I'll tighten both the inner top wishbone bushes. So jacked up, so we've now got 70mm between the lower part of this boss and the very top of the arch itself. So again, if you had the spherical joints on the inside, you wouldn't need to do this. You'd just basically bolt them up, tighten them up anywhere you like, and they'd go into position. But as these bushes are pressed in and fixed, they'll be preloaded, and we don't really want that if we can help it. So with both rear bolts tightened up on the wishbone, we've also adjusted the height level sensor, checked it through its throw or movement of bump and rebound, all the way up to 70mm, and then it's got plenty of clearance. So we'll just mark these with a paint pen to say that they're done tight, and then obviously we can get the wheels back on and check the camber and toe, and then obviously we'll finish off with tightening them and marking them as well. As these inner arm bolts are now tight and secure, we can basically refit all the under bonnet stuff. Okay, so this is now the front geo. The caster obviously you can ignore a little bit, as I've just thrown the system back on and I left this computer running, so I haven't re-tested everything, but the camber is going to be pretty close to that, or should be exactly that. So we've got 2 degrees on the left and 1.5 on the right, just rounding obviously. I'll probably match the right to the left, so we've got 2 degrees both sides. I'm pretty happy with that. We've got quite close clearances between the arch and the tyre, which we need to take into account. So this has got a little bit of stretch on it anyway, and it's a 265, and the arch clearance is quite close at 2 degrees. So if we match both sides to 2 degrees, I think that will give us fairly good handling still. Hopefully get rid of some of the tyre wear that he's been suffering with, and give us enough clearance that we don't do any damage. So where this was left loose, this end nut here, don't have to take the wheel off hopefully, and we'll just get in there, undo that, take the pin out, rotate it probably 1 turn in, and then we'll get back on, see what it's gone to. So back on the Geo machine, and you can see we've gone up on the right hand side, this one here, to 144, which is probably give or take 10 minutes. So 1 more turn should bring us up to the same as the left hand side. If it goes slightly over, it's not a problem, because when he gets in, the camber will go down on the right hand side regardless. But once we've done this one, we'll check it, then we'll take off the bits again, tighten it properly with the Loctite in, and then do the final geometry. Just those 2 turns on the right hand side, brought that in evenly, looks good. So we'll strip down the outer ball joints, Loctite them, nip them up, mark them to say we've tightened them, and then we'll do a final geometry. So final geometry, all done, 2 degrees camber and +2 toe each side. Probably should have more toe on this as a standard car, but as we're trying to reduce tyre wear, obviously increase handling and feedback as well. So that's a pair of Camber King's top camber arms for a C63. Thanks for watching guys. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos, subscribe, hit that bell and get the notifications. You can also check us out on Facebook, the link's going to be in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.